Hello and welcome again to Rewind. I'm Kamal Santamaria. When we launched Al Jazeera English more than 10 years ago, our goal was to bring you the sort of documentaries other channels simply weren't doing. Here on Rewind, we revisit some of the best of them and find out how the stories have moved on. And today we're returning to a film which had a major impact on young lives and changed the way a global business was developing. Tourism. It is one of the biggest drivers of the global economy. In 2018, it was worth nearly $9 trillion, making up more than 10% of the world's gross domestic product. After emerging from more than 2 decades of war in the 1990s, Cambodia has relied heavily on tourism to rebuild its economy. It's one of the top destinations for young travellers, many of whom sign up with global volunteering companies. But there's a dark side to this story. War breeds orphans, and back in 2012, investigative reporter Juliana Ruhfus went undercover to find that well-intentioned tourists were unwittingly fueling the exploitation of children at poorly regulated orphanages. From the People and Power series, this is Cambodia's orphan business.
Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia. Between the 1970s and 1990s, Cambodia was ravaged by civil war. Since its return to peace, there has been a boom in tourism, with over 2 million visiting every year. Keen to help this war-torn country, increasing numbers of tourists are now also working as volunteers. Most come with the very best intentions to work in schools and orphanages, filling a gap left by a lack of development funding. But recently, disturbing stories have emerged that Cambodian children are being exploited by some of the companies organising volunteers or running orphanages. We've come to Cambodia to investigate allegations that quite a few of these orphanages are run not for need, but for profit. Our journey begins on the outskirts of Phnom Penh at an orphanage and school called the People's Improvement Organisation. Set up 10 years ago, it provides free education for children who worked on the city's main garbage dump.
You want to start teaching?
Yes!
No? You may sit down.
If there's an example of best practice in this industry, then perhaps this is it.
I'm going to teach you now about the prepositions. From
Tabitha Berg from Denmark has come to teach for 2 months.
Okay?
So how has it been so far?
I really like that it's so free and I can do whatever I want when I come into my class. I like that everybody's really friendly and the kids are really respectful and they give a lot.
In a deprived neighbourhood, PIO is making a difference through organised volunteering and foreign donations. Its founder, Paimean Nguyen, explains how past conflicts have contributed to the estimated 10,000 Cambodian children in orphanages.
All the farmers, they have children and they are so poor and they abandon them. Sometimes they just come to drop in front of the door and they leave. We don't know where they from, these kids.
Why would a parent leave their child here on the doorstep of your orphanage?
Yeah, as you know, they could not afford to take care. And also, some family, they want the kid to go to school, but they could not afford.
There are now almost 500 orphanages in Cambodia, a figure that has doubled in the past decade. Some, like PIO, rely on foreign volunteers for skills and labour, but the vast majority use volunteering to generate income. We find one of them, the Lighthouse Orphanage, on the other side of town.
One for you.
Thank you.
There you go. Lighthouse is home to 108 boys and girls, ranging from 3 to 18 years old. They request that we donate some food for the children to eat. Do you get good food? Or sometimes do you struggle?
I can say much better than their hometown. Every supporting from government or any NGO yet.
So you need donations from volunteers?
Sure.
Mr. Ritchie is responsible for bringing volunteers to Lighthouse, and he's found a way of increasing revenues. The orphanage is not just hosting gap year volunteers, but groups of school students on short-term stays too. Just now, a group of Canadians are visiting. In their downtime, the students get to play with the children. And over the past week, some special friendships have developed. Even the teachers are not immune.
They may say, I don't know, dealing with the kids is going to be hard. But just when you get here and, you know, one of these little guys walks up and grabs your hand, you have no choice but to sort of fall in love with them. So it's pretty awesome.
As Canadians and orphans grow closer, not just goodwill, but a lot of money is flowing into the orphanages too.
We supplied the labor, probably bought the tiles, the sand, the compost. So we sent about $5,000 ahead of time, and then I brought a few $100s with me. So we bought some rice, some charcoal, a water pump to keep the garden going. So kind of give them a little happiness today with our shopping.
This is a huge amount of money in a country where the average wage is $65 a month. What they will never know is whether all of it will be used for the benefit of the children. We knew from various reports that in a number of cases the huge influx of donor money has attracted unscrupulous business people to open orphanages for the wrong reasons. To find out more, an NGO puts us in touch with Kong Ti and Yan Chan Ti, who grew up in an orphanage. When the donors discovered that the director had been stealing the money donated for the children, the orphanage was closed down. Kong and Chan Ti take us to see their old home, to tell us about the reality of orphans' lives hidden from the eyes of volunteers.
Why didn't you tell the volunteers what was going on?
Kong says he still suffers bouts of depression. He works in 2 different restaurants for just $3 a day. Chan Ti too says he's still affected. He now has a regular job at the airport. But not everyone from the orphanage has fared so well. Chan Ti introduces us to Chai, who lives rough on the streets.
He stays here outside? Hi. Hello.
Chai barely speaks. But it's not just the Cambodians in charge of orphanages who are accused of taking advantage of the money flowing into them. Voluntourism has become a global industry, with foreign companies tapping into the potential profits too. We meet Australian Demi Jacoumes, who has volunteered in Cambodia for the past 3 years, and her experiences have made her jaded about the industry.
I really learned a lot about orphanage tourism and the things that goes on behind the scenes that you wouldn't just see coming your first time.
Demi explains that volunteers like her book their stays in Cambodia through international commercial volunteering companies based outside the country. Her first visit in 2009 was through Projects Abroad, one of the largest in the world. Volunteering comes at a cost, and Demi is surprised how little money actually goes to the local orphanages.
My director once told me that he gets $9 a week per volunteer. And, you know, projects abroad, you can pay up to $3,000 for 1 month. And he gets $9 a week.
So what you're saying, it's about $100 a week for the orphanage if you've got 10 people staying, but thousands for the organisation that sends the volunteers down.
Yeah, it's a lot of money for them. And there's hundreds of orphanages in Phnom Penh, hundreds of volunteers. So they make a really high profit.
Sisha is an NGO that investigates allegations of exploitation of children in orphanages, and it's one of the few places where volunteers can voice their concerns. Hi, you're Erin?
I am.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Juliana.
Juliana.
Erin's team are working on a case about an orphanage called the Children's Umbrella Center Organization, or CUCO, brought to them by former volunteers.
So these are the email complaints that we did get from the volunteers. It really clearly stated what their concerns were. The abuse, the children missing. The director was openly saying that he did want to adopt the children out for a price of about $10,000, which is extremely concerning for Sisha, as well as the diet.
Adoption is illegal in Cambodia at the moment.
There were allegations of physical abuse, lower food standards, so the kids were looking hungry. It was open sewage. The boys were sleeping under a smaller roof, and the roof was leaking.
So this place is getting international volunteers through organizations. Do you know who these organizations are?
Well, 2 of the girls that came forward were volunteering through Projects Abroad.
And this is dating back to literally pretty much 1 year ago.
Yes.
Sisha took the allegations to the Cambodian government, who sent in their examiners in November 2011 and January 2012. CUCO's been inspected twice by the Ministry of Social Affairs, and they found the conditions there appalling. In fact, they threatened that they would close the orphanage down if it doesn't start complying with their minimum standards. To avoid arousing suspicion, we go in undercover as volunteers, wearing hidden cameras.
Hello.
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 We are greeted by Sinet Sok, the orphanage's director.
Hello. How are you today?
You can start the lesson.
Okay.
Sinet is keen for us to start teaching straight away.
The first time you can train, example, you start 12:30 until 1:30, break time.
The thing is, I have never done any teaching.
Yeah, I understand. So you can train the simple here because I have the book. You can read.
T. U. D. Having simply walked off the street, we are now teaching an English class. Then there is a seemingly endless amount of playtime. Many of the children are hyperactive and all demand constant attention.
This is just a complete joke. We've been totally abandoned. We're meant to have a timetable that we're sticking to. But instead we're kind of just left. There's no lunch, there are no drinks. The kids have got nothing to do. And our teaching was totally pointless.
When Sinet returns, he shows us the children's rooms. Only half of the beds have mattresses.
God, that looks so hard.
Right now, only 8.
Oh, it's not wood, it's metal.
These are the conditions the government inspectors asked him to improve.
That's open. The roof is open.
Yeah, when the rain come down, wait here, wait.
Not good for the children, is it?
Yeah, I see, but I try to do. Appeal to other people, if you have friends, free help situation of the kids here.
In the middle of the courtyard, we also see the open sewer reported to Sisha. There are accusations that Sinet uses the children's misery to generate donations. Whether or not this is true, he certainly doesn't seem to make any effort to meet the government's minimum standards. Before we leave, Sinet tries to get money out of us again.
I am unhappy with the food. Can you have me every day or not?
So when you don't have food, does that mean the kids don't eat?
No, sometimes I go with some people and sometimes I have to ask somebody. Very hard, you know.
Sometimes they go hungry.
Yeah, only rice.
Things at CUCO are bad. But in the evening, we learn that they can get even worse. Cambodia has become a target for child sex offenders, and Wandu Kam investigates such cases for an NGO called Action pour les enfants. He is deeply concerned that some volunteer placement organizations fail to ask volunteers to undergo criminal record checks.
This is the very high risk for Cambodian children who are living in the orphanage. This guy, he's American guy, and he came to Cambodia through Project Abroad. He worked in a pediatric hospital.
Shockingly, this man, Dr. James D'Agostino, had originally come to Cambodia through volunteering with projects abroad.
And at the time, he also brought 3 underage boys and 1 adult to live with him in the private rented house. And according to the statement from the boy, he abused the boy on multiple occasions.
In another case, a British paedophile, Nick Griffin, had opened his very own orphanage and abused boys there. Both men were found guilty in Cambodian courts and sentenced to jail terms of 4 and 2 years respectively. We returned to Kuku to follow up on the single most serious allegation that some of the children have gone missing from the orphanage.
Disturbing your meal. How are you?
To our surprise, a Dutchman has arrived.
I'm a volunteer, but what do you do here?
Also the same thing.
Really? Okay. But I live in a house from the organization with other people who are volunteering.
Which organization is that?
Project Abroad.
Oh, okay.
They have 6 apartments in Phnom Penh.
Wherever we turn, we keep hearing about projects abroad. To our amazement, he tells us Projects Abroad never asked him for a criminal background check, which he would have had to agree to under Dutch law. When we go looking for Director Sinnott, we find him at the back.
How are you? Hello, how are you?
We want to test how serious he is about protecting his orphans by asking him if we can remove some of the children.
Good. It's our friend Rani, Sinnott.
For everyone's safety, we've asked a social worker to join us. We tell Sinnott she's a friend and interpreter.
We wanted to this afternoon to see if we can take some of the kids to have a little tour near Phnom Penh.
How many kids do you want to choose? Maybe you can.
Yeah.
I can call them.
Sinnott is actually getting us to choose between the children. And minutes later, we leave with 4 of them. Never once have we been asked for identification. This is actually totally crazy. Sinnott just allowed us to pick up 4 kids from his orphanage. They're in our car now, and we could just drive off with them. We knew from Sisha's investigation that the children are from the northeast of the country. But the paperwork at the orphanage was fabricated, and their birth parents could not be traced.
Do you remember your parents?
The sad reality is that even if the government would come to the rescue of these children, they could never be reunited with their families. During our time in Cambodia, we had heard a lot about projects abroad. Now it was time to find out more. Projects Abroad had a turnover of over $24 million in 2010. They made over $3 million profit and paid a dividend of $1 million to the 2 directors. I've asked Projects Abroad why they continue sending their volunteers into orphanages that are so clearly failing the children, and why they are putting children at risk by not asking all their volunteers for criminal background checks. The company declines an on-camera interview, but tells us in writing that Kuku receives $50 per month for every volunteer. They say that even if the allegations against Kuku were correct, it would be better for the children and the orphanage to have vetted volunteers on the ground. They also claim that since 2010 they do criminal background checks on the over 30s, and that for those younger they require a written reference from a school, college or named referee. When we put our allegations to Sinnott, the director of Kuku, he denied them all. Most volunteers decide on visiting Cambodia with nothing but good intentions, and until things improve, the country and its people are said to benefit from sharing qualified skills. But most volunteers also arrive via an increasingly commercialized system. And before leaving home, it's worth investigating who really stands to profit from their presence.
Cambodia's Orphan business, a film which played a major part in increasing the understanding of the potential dangers of voluntourism. Well, I'm very pleased to say that we're joined here in the studio by the filmmaker herself, Juliana Ruhfus. Lovely to see you, Juliana. You were one of the first people to report on this internationally. How did you even come across a story like this?
I'm actually quite interested in psychology, and I was attending a conference on trauma, and it was a global conference, and there was a psychologist, sociologist from Cambodia, and she'd been working on that issue because a lot of the children were damaged psychologically, and she told me about it, and I thought it was astounding that this really wasn't an issue that was known about at all.
Tell us about the children who you met there. First of all, we use the word orphans. Are they all technically what we would believe to be orphans?
Yeah, I mean, that was really the first thing that I was interested in. The vast majority of the children in these so-called orphanages actually do have parents, and they're people who go around and who effectively recruit these children. They say to the parents that the children are going to get great education, that they'll be in touch with lots of Westerners, and the parents allow these recruiters to take the children, and then they get put into these, again, orphanages. And it effectively, some of these orphanages are a money-making machine.
And do the children actually get to see the benefits of any of that money, or?
A lot of the children are really damaged. They're damaged firstly because they're being taken away from their parents. And then secondly, a lot of them, and you can actually see that in our film, they have what is called an attachment disorder, so that they continuously get attached to a new person, a new volunteer, plays with them, shows them with affection, and then leaves very quickly.
I'm trying to imagine what you went through on that, actually. I know it's about the children, but I mean, that's a very emotional thing to go through.
Where this story really got me is when we tried to take some of the children out for a day out, and what we tried to demonstrate is really the complete neglect of care. You
were just allowed to do it. This is the thing, you could have been anyone.
It was extraordinary, because actually Cambodia is a country that has a well-known problem with child abuse, especially paedophilia. That is foreigners, foreign tourists, so-called tourists, again, coming in and abusing children. So the idea that we could take these children out without any supervision was quite astounding, and that is really the thing that hit me. I was so focused on will this happen, can we take the kids out, that when we finally sat with these kids in the car, it was actually quite emotional, because we had this sense we were driving off with them in a car, and we could have done absolutely anything to these kids.
And when you did take the children out of the orphanage, you had a social worker with you, right?
Yeah, you can actually see her in the film. And the social worker, she was there for two reasons. Firstly, to protect the children, to make sure that they are safe and comfortable, and she helped translate. But secondly, it was also to actually protect us, because we were aware that we were making what could be a very controversial film, and we were worried about future allegation accusing us to have done something incorrect with the children. So she was there also to make sure that we were safe in that sense.
And what's happened since? What, as far as tightening up the laws, well, we can talk about the government, but what about the actual orphanages themselves? Are they still operating like this?
Yeah, there were actually quite a few responses to this. So firstly, on an international level, the awareness has really grown. So Australia, I would say, is, as a country, a leading example, because they have actually made the trafficking of children into orphanages illegal. They're describing it as a modern form of slavery. So that's the international response. Then in Cambodia itself, the authorities have reacted to some degree. They've shut down some of the orphanages, and they've worked with international agencies like the UN and also international organizations to close these orphanages down and actively reunite the children from orphanages with the families where possible. But also, and this was particularly important to me, some of the companies that run voluntourism schemes have decided to abandon the sending of untrained volunteers into orphanages.
Juliana, it's been fascinating talking to you. Really great. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And Projects Abroad, the company which you saw in that film, say they no longer work in orphanages. They say they now work with community-based projects, which means working with children still living at home. Well, that is it for this edition of Rewind. Do check us out online at aljazeera.com for more films from the series and updates from the Al Jazeera archive. And we'll see you again next time.